Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Gareth James. Hey, looking forward to this, Gareth. Great to have a Brit on the show for finally. It seems like ages since we had a Brit on the show, right?
Well, thank you for inviting me.
This is a video. You're nodding. This is
Sorry,
this
thank
is
you
a
for
podcast. You're nodding, right?
thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
You're so welcome, right? So, listeners, I don't know if you know this, but Gareth is it's a Welsh name, really. Gareth,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
a
yeah.
Welsh name. And I was actually born in Wales, not too far away from Gareth, where Gareth lives. Where were you born? He's an adoptee, listeners. Where were you born, Gareth? Where were
I
you
was
born?
born in the southeast of England. I was born in Bexley Heath, but
Right,
my adoptive parents are both from Newport, South Wales. So all
right.
four of my grandparents are from Wales. So Wales has always been very much part of my upbringing. I'm very familiar with Wales. So when I moved back to
Yeah,
Wales, I'm not sure it's felt like coming home because I've always
yeah.
grown up in England, but it embraced me, and I feel I've been here nearly 20 years now, and I feel extremely comfortable.
Right. That's sometimes unusual for adoptees, right? To feel comfortable.
No,
Um,
it really is. I mean, I've highlighted to people here. I mean, I've lived in Manchester, Newcastle, London, Maidenhead, Los Angeles. When I moved to Aberystwyth, 20 years in and around Aberystwyth. I have never ever felt anywhere like I belong in West Wales,
yeah,
which is
um,
weird.
yeah. So I was going to ask, I was going to jump in there and ask you to rationalize that. But like, why do we think like it's a feeling, right?
Yeah, no, it is a
Why
feeling.
do we feel that it's got something to do with what's going on in our head? Why do we ask questions about rationale? It's like, what, I remember early in the days of going out with Lynn, who's now my wife, like, so this is back in 93. Why do I love Lynn? Right. And it didn't really occur to me that I was looking in the wrong filing cabinet. Right. But the best I could come up with was she does what she says she's going to do. In terms of a rationale, right? She does what she says she's going to do. And that's actually a big value of mine, is doing what I say I'm going to do.
I'd add to that. And I'm going to speculate on your marriage here, but I think one of the reasons that we find someone or somebody or somewhere easy to or easier or to love is because they love us. And that's a massive tick box. I'm a transracial adoptee. I'm black. And so my experience of growing up in 1970s and 1980s England is not a feeling that the country loves me or the area loves me. It's either too big. If you live in London, London can't love you because it's vast. But you move to a little place like Aberystwyth, and you sort of get on with life, and you contribute to the community, and you can feel and know. And it's beyond feeling, it's knowing. And maybe it's the same with a good wife, shall I say, is that they love you. And all of a sudden that can allow you to really sink in and get comfortable. And what I mean in an adoptee context, they love you and they don't have to. There's no obligation to love you. They just love you because of who you are. And I have felt, and of course it's not universal, I'm sure there's plenty of people around here that I get right up the nose of, but overwhelmingly, I feel appreciated and loved, in and around this area. In a way, because the population's so small, that you feel that like you're a real part of the community. You're
Yeah,
contributing and you're taking.
yeah. Do they have to love us first then?
From an adoptee perspective, I mean, I can only speak from my perspective, which is,
Yeah. All
and
right. So did they have to love you first?
I, I think perhaps it's you sort of going along together. Love grows, and maybe we're
Right.
attracted to them in the first place, and then we like them, and then we like them a lot. I'm not going to dig into the philosophy of what or the ideology of what love is. I'm using it in a very broad brush sense that it reaches a stage where I've been writing for the local newspaper. I've worked in I've worked in a bar. I've built community events, and over 20 years, you cannot not hear people go, actually, that Gareth, he's all right, you know. Uh, and it's like, I can live with this. This is comfortable in the way that England never was.
Cool. So when we before I hit record, I said, "How you doing?" And you said that I that I'd given you a lot of food for thought, and I said, Did I say did it make you sick? I mean, like overeating, right?
You do.
So I'm the metaphor here, right, is overeating and overthinking. And as you were saying that you like to think, you like to think deeply. I was thinking I have a tendency to overthink. So for the last 5 minutes since we hit record, I've just been thinking about 70s, 80s song lyrics, right?
You should have
So
been
there's
listening to. You should have been listening to me.
well, was I listening? Yeah, could I do both? Hey, and I was thinking, I don't. It's not prefab sprouts. Something. Talk. I'll get over you. I'm sure I will. I know this ship's not sinking. I'll get over you. Da, 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 da. I'm the king of wishful thinking. King of wishful thinking, and I've been thinking, well, I'm the king of overthinking, right? So that was the first lyric that came to mind, and then the next one was it Foreigner? I want to know what love is. I want you to show me, right? I
That's
want
a that's that
I
that's a
want you
very
to
good one.
I want to show me. Um, let's dive into this thinking thing because you say that you like doing it, and you're talking about an opportunity to a disagreement is an opportunity to check our check our thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So take it away from there.
Right. Well, I mean, you seem really quite resistant to overthinking, and I can understand that overthinking. I mean, it very much is a double-edged sword. Most things are, most tools are, and the propensity to overthink often. I mean, maybe we should not use the word overthink because that's to give it a pejorative in the
Yeah.
first instance.
Yeah. Sure.
So to think deeply, um, I think gives us a chance to connect with reality. It allows us to pursue mental well-being from a rational point of view, not from a wishful thinking point of view. I might suggest that wishful thinking is is not deep thinking. It's shallow thinking. It's thinking this is the problem. I wish this outcome. Therefore, insert your own narrative to fit those two things, rather than deep thinking is to check where you are now, and then piece together. This is how I do it: logical and rational, and question every sort of aspect of that thinking as you go along, not with a um, not with a destination in mind, but an exploration to see where you end up as. And so
Mm.
there's no resistance to changing your ideology, changing your philosophy, new information. To deep think is to appreciate that if new information comes in that changes the landscape, it's not to be resisted. It's to be absorbed, however complicated that might be, and have your thinking adjusted. It's never a done deal.
Yeah.
I've never reached any point of thought where I go, right, okay, I never need to think about that again, because that's all sorted out. The I think the two big things are deep thinking must involve your personal or one's personal experience and perspective, that can't be sort of washed away by other people's experience and perspective. But also, other people's experience and perspective can inform why you may think a certain way, or why thinking a certain way, I don't want to say isn't correct, but is can be adjusted because new information that you didn't have before that aha moment. Oh, I'd not thought of that. And boff, 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 off you go in a new train of thought, never ending, of course.
Yeah.
Does that answer that?
Kind of, yeah. Um, you said resistance to overthinking, and as I was thinking about it, I was thinking resisting, and then I thought of another song lyric as I happened to do right, and this was faithless. I can't get no sleep, right? So the song's Insomnia, and it's faithless. I can't get no sleep. So I can't get no sleep. I can't get no peace, right? So my aversion to overthinking is is actually coming from the place I can't get no sleep. Often, it used to be like that because I would be lying awake at night or usually in the morning, trying to think my way out of think my way out of a problem and overthinking. So solutions came to me usually through an insight after a bout of overthinking, not right. So when I put the thing on the back burner, when I put the problem on the back burner, then the solution came to me, not actually at the end of the overthinking train. Right? The solution is found in the solution. Comes to us out of the blue, right? Solutions for me are more about insights from the back burner. So, like, I'm going to guess you're not a Jack Reacher fan, Lee Child.
No, I'm a bit more I like to think I'm a little bit more literary
Indeed,
than
yeah.
that.
I mean, you run, you've written your own book. You run a publishing company. I wouldn't imagine that you are a Lee Child, Jack Reacher fan. Um, but Jack Reacher has if Jack Reacher's got a problem, he just says, "I'm going to put it on the back burner," and he goes to sleep, and then he wakes up
Well,
usually with the answer. So the answer comes from the answer is a bolt out of the blue rather than something that comes from the overthinking. That's kind of my take on it.
I think I've got a couple of things to add to this. First off, I think deep thinking should be split up into deep thinking when you're in a good mood and deep thinking
Okay.
when you're struggling, because they're two very, very different activities. If you and I are going to Barbados tomorrow and we can't sleep because we're just lying in bed planning, how we're going to be on the beach and what drinks we're going to have, and this is going to be great. That's not a problem.
Rum
Yeah,
punch every time. Yeah.
absolutely. It's not a problem. This is not problematic deep thinking.
No.
If you've got divorced and it was 10 years ago, and you wake up in the middle of the night trying to work out why this is still bothering you, for example, I would argue that hasn't come out of the blue. If if you're in a positive phase, those thoughts aren't going to come into your head. If you're in a little, the black dog has walked into the room, all these unhelpful uh, thoughts come in, which we then start to overthink. So I do think the two should be split. The sec the
I like
second
that. I like that.
the the second thing is you've mentioned Jack Reacher and you've mentioned yourself, and both times you used the word solution. These are not maths problems. I would argue the subjects like your own adoption, there is no solution. I mean, I will talk for myself, but I'd be very surprised if anyone else went, oh, I had this thought, or somebody said something, and everything was solved. What it is a. I mean, deep thinking about adoption is probably more often than not in the negative side, because I mean, the only difference is when you and I were talking last week, when we're looking at it more less emotionally, more rationally, because I have not spent a lot of time in my 61 years talking to other adult adoptees about what they think about, how they think. Um, I mean, uh, I've read articles and I've on social media more recently. I've looked at what other people have to say, and it appears to me that there are as many adoption experiences as there are adoptees. I mentioned earlier that I'm black. There are. If I was adopted because my parents got killed in a car crash, um, I'm not saying that's all butterflies and roses, but anyone as a youngster or as an adult can get their head round. I would expect them to be able to get their head round that. It is just you don't have parents anymore. Therefore, somebody needed to look after you. Therefore, blah 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 blah. If you are a like yourself, you're adopted out at, I think you said 5 or 6 weeks old. You can look at the circumstances I couldn't, my birth parents couldn't look after me, or blah 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 blah. Blah. If you're black and adopted, it's different again because you can't untangle the sense of shame, the racism, the casual racist attitudes or the casual, not attitudes, but the casual racism and entrenched racism of the 60s, the 70s. And that adds a context to adoption that is not the same for white children, white adoptees, black adoptees, and I will speak from my own personal experience. It doesn't matter what anyone says. I know the landscape of 1964, and there would have been a sense of shame about their beautiful daughter having this black or brown child, and the context of and the thought of having to push that round, and the inevitable backlash, and the inevitable loss of status, whether these things are true or not, and in a lot of cases they would have been true. It's not difficult for me to imagine the scenario where no, we're just not doing this. So there was forced adoption for, and there was a sense of shame for white mothers having white children. But you can add several zeros to that. If the child is black or brown. I mean, your adoption experience is as private as you want it to be. If you're with your parents, nobody's going to look at your little unit and start asking questions about it. If you're two white parents with a black child in a pram, it's not a private situation. It is a global. Anybody who looks upon this knows that a question: How's this happened? And adoption. So your adoption is never private. I mean, I've looked at so many posts in social media and listened to you that I watched your YouTube video yesterday, your introductory one, where you said it was never kept a secret. I was told that I was adopted since before I can remember. Now that's my experience, but for a different reason. You they it wouldn't have taken me long to if they had just thought that they would right. We're going to keep this a
Yeah.
secret until he's 16. That's never going to work. So I was very aware that I was adopted, like yourself, right from the get-go. And of course, I mean, this leads me into the questions that you have around trauma. Is that I mean, we should be careful and we should define our terms with regard of actually what do we mean when we say trauma. And I'm going to look at obviously you can have physical trauma and you can have emotional trauma or psychological trauma. And I think we're talking about psychological trauma. We talk about wounds. We talk about this. We talk about that. I'm I'm again, I think they need splitting up into two different categories. I do not know, and I can never know who I would have been if I would have been raised by my birth family. Um, uh, you know, I think research shows that if you take any mammal away from its mother, however young it is, there are effects. That is not a neutral act. We cannot know, I don't think, as individuals, what the effect was of being removed from our birth mother. For me, it was 10 days. I've got those little notes saying, I was fed this on this day and I weighed this much on this day, and then boom, I'm gone. So the trauma of that I can't put my finger on. It would be very easy for me to sit here and say, well, I'm doing okay. I've had a, life's okay. Therefore, no trauma. Um, I can't say that. I don't know. Then there's and that sort of and then there's a different sort of trauma that this isn't. If we'd have been bereaved of a wife or a child, yeah, there's a psychological impact upon us immediately as an adult that this somehow is going to be processed, in a negative way or in a positive way. If we'd have lost our leg, in a terrible accident, if we'd have been involved in a war, these are psychological traumas that are inflicted upon an adult that they can look and professionals can look at and say, well, before this event, and then after this event. With adoption, especially being adopted as babies, as you and I were, it was completely normal. For you only know what you know. So when I'm 3 years old or 4 years old, and my parents say, and you're adopted, and your parents loved you, and they're this and that, and blah 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 blah, you kind of just sit there and nod and go, of course, my parents are telling me this. This is how it is. So my experience is as I've grown older, as I've had my own relationships, as I've had my own children, you get to sort of reprise these conversations. And my experience is that this isn't a sudden shock, like a trauma. This is a growing understanding or a growing realization or a growing suspicion that this is this is not normal. This is not, and I put my fingers up because how it should be. This is not a 100% positive that can be neatly tied up to a 3, 4, or 5 year old. You have your own relationships, you have your own children, and you assess these by perhaps putting yourself in the shoes of the protagonists here, and this is where the problems I think start to grow, is that I can put myself in the shoes of the family that I came from, and just very easy for me to say there are under no circumstances in which I would have given that children away, none. If my daughter couldn't cope, we'd help. If da we'd chip in. So if I put myself in those shoes, I get what's the word? I feel a little let down. This is not like losing a leg, all of a sudden. It's a growing realization that it doesn't, to put it in childish terms, it's not fair. It's not how I would have acted. It's not how I would have acted. And that, and I've missed out. I feel that I've missed out on my Caribbean culture. I've missed out on uh, siblings, birth parents. Um, it's a big miss. So the trauma is and I'm using that term really without defining it, and is a growing, starts tiny, in my consciousness I'm talking about, and compounds itself over time, um, as you think deeply about it, in a more adult way with your own experiences.
So I think what you're doing is you're breaking it down into two things, right? The event at 10 days old, and you're thinking about it over the following
Six
60,
decades.
six decades.
Yeah,
So, and the thinking and the meaning that you're uh, inferring from it, from your thinking.
yeah, yeah. No, yeah. No, it is. They are, in my experience, they're two. One I can define, which is my adult thinking about it, and um, I can articulate why I feel a certain way. The other is just completely unknown, and
Yeah.
it's one of the things I think we as adoptees, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, can be absolutely certain of is we will never know who we would have been.
Yeah, and that's more thinking. That's part of the thinking thing.
Absolutely,
Um,
you're not coming up with that as a
yeah.
3-year-old.
So I'm fascinated by the contrast here, uh, Gareth, because what one of the things that you shared with me last time is that you felt that you felt for most of your life, I think, that you got the golden ticket. So that to me that feels like uh, yeah, that feels that feels positive.
Yeah,
But then
absolutely.
that feels positive, but that seems to clash with the stuff that you've been talking about for the last 10 minutes.
And that's
I
allowed.
yeah, yeah. But I'm fascinated by that contrast, and I want to explore
well,
that
well,
contrast.
my life has been fascinating, and it's gone very, very well in many, many areas. Um, that's not the same for all adoptees, and that's what I'm aware of. It absolutely isn't this, and I can look at the slippery slopes mentally I could have got on and have been on. I mean, I I uh, I I and adoptees from black and brown backgrounds in the UK are going to do very well not to tie that up with abandonment in the way. And this is what I was saying. If your parents are killed in a car crash, I doubt you're going to have abandonment issues. If you were given up for reasons that you suspect may be racial, you are gonna, if you think about that you are gonna be tying that up with abandonment. Now, that's all well and good. Well, it's not all well and good. That is what it is. If then later in life you get divorced, or when one of your friends decides that they don't want to be your friend anymore, these things then get wrapped up. And I don't um, begrudge adoptees having abandonment. And what I would say is to use the phrase from that book, abandonment wounds, and abandonment trauma. And because for you not to have those, we would go back to that wishful thinking you were. Yeah. I want to imagine that I wasn't abandoned because I would feel better about myself and da 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 da.
Yeah.
Simplistic thinking, that's happy, great, that's going to work. If you're a deep thinker, that's never going to wash. And so, uh,
But we want to feel good. We want to feel good, don't we? We don't want to think good.
no, and the thing.
Our aims in life are about feeling good, not about thinking good.
Well, it's absolutely it's. I mean, what I've always said to my children is, if you're smiling more than you're frowning, you're winning. And when I looked at your questions earlier about, what do you consider thriving? Well, if you're smiling more than you're frowning, you're thriving. And
Yeah.
but nobody wants to go through. Well, I don't want to go through life like a grinning idiot. Uh, you know, everything's okay at all times. Everything's positive. Life and complex thought is nuanced. I look at my life and I have spent an awful lot more time smiling than frowning. If I'd gone through life 100% smiling, I would worry about my sanity. So I can look at life or a period of time and go, it's been a golden ticket. This has been brilliant. This has been great. But that doesn't make it all butterflies and rainbows. On the other hand, there are complexities. I've been divorced. I found that complicated. Yeah, adoption doesn't define my existence, but it's a reality. And there is, in my mind, there's very little doubt that that hasn't played into good times and bad times in a positive and a negative way. I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here. You can edit it out if you like, but I think one of the um, oh, now I've totally forgotten what I was going to say. I'll come back to that in a minute. But the idea of going through life forever smiling, or adoption being an entirely positive thing or an entirely negative thing. I've remembered what I was going to say. I think one of the most positive aspects of my adoption was the freedom it has given me. I am aware as an adult, and again, these are thought processes that I've had as an adult rather than sort of had when I was a child and the experiences were going on. Is that there's not a day in my life that I felt an obligation to follow a certain route, following a certain pathways. I've always been the whole world's been open to me for me to do exactly what I want. Whereas I know a lot of my non-adopted friends feel, well, I felt that I had to go to uni, or I felt that I had to go into the family business, or I felt that I had to, I was following in somebody's footsteps. Whereas an adoptee, I think my parents, I think one of the first things they realized is, well, we can't really guide this one. I mean, we can sort of keep them out of trouble and love them and this, that, and the other, but we can't put obligations on this child about what we want them to do and be. So I've always made, since the day I stepped out of school, made my own decisions without question from my adopted parents. And that's a freedom that a lot of natural children don't get. And so there are upsides and there's downsides. I would argue that the downsides are way, way outweigh the upsides. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make a life out of the negatives.
Yeah. I'm still kind of wrestling with this this idea because there's the contract. There's a contrast there, and one of my adoptee friends, a lady called Jean Widner that I interviewed a while ago, and she's from the States, she's from Las Vegas, but she actually came over to Leeds for an adoption conference last month, and the book is called The Adoption Paradox. So kind of, paradox is at the center here, yeah, and yet the the overall the overall the overall position, your overall position seems to be the you said you've smiled more than you've frowned, right?
Yep.
So on hand with there's that, and then the other hand, you say, but the uh, the 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 negatives outweigh the positives.
Of adoption, but adoption isn't my whole life. If adoption was my whole life,
Okay, okay, right.
if it,
I'm,
if
I'm
it,
getting the algorithm, Gareth. Sorry, man. I'm
good.
a little bit slow on the uptake. Perhaps I'm trying to oversimplify into black and white. Sorry for the pun, right? Here's one, right? And oh, you asked about editing. I never edit, right? So listeners, and most listeners will probably realize before that I never edit. Um, is there how can I ask this? Because it's tricky for a white guy to ask these stuff, right? Without becoming across as a fascist, which I hope I'm not, right?
I'll tell you if you come across as a
Okay.
fascist. Don't worry
Okay.
about
Okay.
that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So before I do, right? Because I was talking about this the other day, and I didn't know the difference. What is the difference between a racist and a fascist? Is the one?
Oh yeah, I would think so. I mean, I mean, I would have to go and have a look at my terms. But a fascist is somebody who likes authoritarianism, nationalism, and it encompasses a whole, militarism. It encompasses a whole thing. A racist is somebody who's just scared of black and brown people,
Yeah.
or and has a misplaced sense of
Yeah.
superiority.
So is there a difference between being placed for adoption because of who you are? Sorry, because is the difference between um, personal reasons and racial reasons? Do they seem kind of separate to me?
Yeah, they're totally separate. I mean, I've grown up in the UK. Somebody would have to go an awfully long way to try and persuade me that I haven't grown up in a racist country with from top to bottom. Um, if you are adopted because and I think I mean what makes it interesting is I as a transracial adoptee, I was given the immediate contrast. And what I mean by that is that if I suspect that I was given up because I was black and the family didn't want to go through that, I was adopted into a white family who were prepared to do that. And I've heard stories from my adoptive mother where, she's been abused in the street because I'm in the pram and blah 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 blah. Blah. So, to put it really simplistically, it would be easy for me to look at it as going, I was born into like the worst family in the world who were willing to give up a black baby because and then immediately moved into the best family in the world, who were totally prepared to deal with those societal
Wow.
interventions. So I mean, my existence, I've never spent any amount of time wondering who my birth mother is. I get a little bit irritated, and maybe irrationally, that I mean, even my adoptive mother spends time empathizing with my birth mother and their family. And I have to sort of go, well, hang on, I'm in here as well. It's like the that recent apology. That recent apology seemed very addressed to birth mothers and not very addressed to adoptees. And that got up my nose. It's we spend an awful lot of time normalizing, and again, I'm not talking about they died in a crash. I'm talking about abandonment adoption, which is a subset of adoption. So this does not cover all adoptions. I don't want adoptees ringing me up and go, "Hang on a minute, my mum really loved me, and the circumstances were A, B, C, D, E, F, and G." That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the suspicion or the reality that a family was horrified that their daughter gave birth to a black or brown child, and the sooner they could get it out, move away, you know,
Yeah.
and sweep this under the rug, the better. Now that feeds into now I don't I have a grossly overinflated self opinion of myself, but that kind of abandonment does not feed into your sense of self-worth. Luckily, or I say luckily, I'm going to put my inverted commas up there because I've grown up in the UK. I'm aware of that. This is not a massive shock that white families are going, no, no, I'm not having a brown child around here because it's going to be a daily reminder of blah, 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 so it's a transracial adoption is not the same as adoption for personal, family, or catastrophic reasons, because um, because of the reality of the 1960s in the UK and the numbers involved. This is not the occasional brown baby who is shipped out of a white family. This is an industrial process by the National Children's Home.
So I heard the guy. So I can't remember his surname, but the guy who did all the research or most of the research for those birth mothers and to get their apology from the government. I heard him speak at that conference in Leeds. I don't know if I shared this with you when we spoke last, but he identified the institutional reason for uh, for the focus of for the focus on adopting the kids of single mothers, right? And it was an institutional reason for it.
Yeah,
And the institutional reasons, the institutional reason was they wanted single women to be available for making munitions in the Second World War.
yeah. No, it's. I said that's 20 years before our time, but it makes.
And yet, yeah. So that's the reason it was introduced, right?
And once the ball started rolling,
And systems are not meant to change. We have. So you were talking about working in a pub, right? We used to have licensing hours, didn't we? And we
yeah,
still do to some extent, right? You couldn't drink between two and five on a Sunday or something like that, yeah. Um, but the licensing laws, they were put in place
yeah,
so that the munitions workers weren't
we're ready
drunk.
to go. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
ready to go.
Well, I was going to say piss, but piss means angry in the States, right? So the reason they so the and so what the Americans call pissed, we call pissed off,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't. Did you come across that in LA? You say yeah,
No,
LA.
of course. I
Yeah,
was there for a few years,
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah. So that was the institutional reason, and once that institutional change had happened, then that was kind of set in stone, and until the government changed the law and loosened the line. So that and what at the center of this apology was an admission that the government had been complicit and aware of the instigators of the habit because they instigated that,
yeah,
but they then outsourced it
to the National Children's Home.
to
Yeah,
the children's homes and to the churches and stuff like that. So their hands weren't dirty,
yeah,
but they started they initiated the change. And so I asked the guy, I asked a fascinating discussion, a fascinating interest in information from this Michael who described the run up into it. I asked him, so what was this the bureaucracy of government saying we're not going to apologize, or was it the social workers, right? So was it government or was it social workers? And he said it was both. And I was going, well, why can't they just say they're sorry, right? So what's the big deal? And the big deal was they were concerned about uh, legal cases and money.
Oh, no, I would be very surprised if we didn't have a claim.
But as they have set aside some money, and a an adoption professional who is also an adoptee that I know worked out the sums, and it's 21 quid each, £21 each.
And I'm guessing that's going to
Can I have my
adopted
21
mothers.
quid?
I'm guessing that's going to adopted mothers rather than
Well,
adoptees.
I don't know.
I
Is
mean,
that? But 21 quid anyway, right? So the price of just drink
yeah,
these days, we were at the airport, went to Greece, and one a bottle of beer, a pint of beer, and a glass of wine at Newcastle Airport was more than 21 quid, right?
yeah,
So that's just too.
it's
It's a nothing, right?
yeah.
It's a nothing. But the admission of guilt is far more significant than the.
And I
Anyway,
think,
it took us down a side.
but let me jump in on this. As an adoptee, I think that would be comforting because all of a sudden, again, we talked about wishful thinking that's not based on anything, and I was saying, well, actually, no, that's not very bright. Well, with that information, the fact that that there was a structure to take children away from single mothers allows an adoptee to go, well, it's not my birth family's fault in any way, shape, or form, and you've got that comforting blanket that you can blame the government. And so, and that sort of more fits into the car accident scenario. These were circumstances outside my birth family's control, outside my control, that ended up with the necessity or the reality of me being adopted.
Can I?
You throw the transracial aspect into that, and of course that doesn't really help very much. It's and this is why I'm focused on the transracial aspects of adoption as very separate to the rest of adoption, because to dismiss the racial aspect of that is wishful thinking of the highest order. So though the apologies may be comforting for a lot of adoptees, in so much I'll put this harshly, it sort of lets the birth family off the hook. With transracial adoptees, you can't then just take them off the hook because you're still sitting there thinking, um,
I and
what was all this about,
Yeah,
really?
and yet what you were seemed to be saying a bit ago was so I I left a racist family and joined a non-racist family.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Oh,
mean, you can put it. That's very absolute terms, but
I think a better word would be bigoted.
yeah, okay. So
I
I left a more bigoted family and moved and grew up in a less bigoted family.
absolutely. I don't think anybody's no,
Clear, yeah.
clear of anything. So no, absolutely. And
Apart
so
from me,
you,
I'm a joking. I'm joking. I'm joking, Gary.
but no, I think that's that's an important sustenance for me. is that I didn't go out of the frying pan into the fire. I mentioned to you previously, it would have been very easy for me to have been brought up in a children's home. And the children's homes of the 60s and 70s were not a place that I imagine I would have thrived in at all. The amount of abuse. I mean, the fact that, I mean, I'm sure you remember. I mean, almost every town had a children's home, and you kept the hell away from the children's home kids. you know, you
Yeah.
know, and that so easily could have been me. I mean, it would have been almost certain that that would have been me. Uh,
Have you read Lem Sisay's book?
I haven't, and I should do because I came across a review for it from written by somebody I know. So the problem about being a publisher is that you in 2 years I've not read a book that I haven't needed to read from a work perspective. So at some point, hopefully, I can establish this publishing company to a point where I can actually go back to my ever growing book shelf of books that I need to read at some point, and that one is certainly on the list. But so's the wound one you mentioned. I can't remember its full title, but I almost bought that yesterday. Actually, I put an order in for it yesterday, but it's on my list of things.
Don't.
Oh, okay, okay. The thing is,
It's
I'm
not
never going,
true.
but I'm never going to read a book and go, well, this is all correct. This is my new mentor. I'm never going to listen to anyone and go, this is the fountain of all knowledge. Uh, there are, as I said, I'm absolutely in agreement that there are wounds from trauma. Whether we're equipped to deal with them, maybe that's the roll of the dice. And I would argue for me that I have been very well equipped to deal with them. And even though I explained to you before, I would say the negatives of adoption greatly outweigh the positive of adoption. My whole life isn't based on my adoption. It's a small chunk. So that negativity isn't it doesn't overwhelm onto everything else. If life's not going great, and in 60 years I've had a couple of episodes when life hasn't been going brilliantly, no, absolutely, then it can become those wounds open up. And to use that example, you get your wife leaves you. All of a sudden, there is very few people who aren't going to tie those two abandonments into the same "what's wrong with me" narrative.
Hmm. Gareth, we're coming up on time. Is there anything that you'd like to share that I've not asked you about?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we could go on for the rest of days, but
We could.
uh, no, it's very interesting for me because, as I said, I haven't spent a great deal of time talking to adoptees, and I need to gen up on that, and involve myself a little bit more. I don't think there's a solution to adoption. I don't think there's a cure-all. I don't think there's a route for one that will suit everyone. As I said, my experience or my notes suggest that there are as many different adoption experiences as there are adoptees, and I think the real therapy is common cause amongst adoptees. The feeling of isolation can be, this has only ever happened to me. This is the worst thing in the world. Well, obviously, if you're immersed with a group of other people who have been through the same thing, some have dealt with it better, some have dealt with it worse. Everybody's different. At least, what you haven't got, however bad you're feeling about something at a certain time, it's not, you're not the first, you're not the last, then you're not the only one. And I think that always helps because when trauma comes along, we look inside and we go, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to a human being in the world. And that sense, so there's no point in talking to anybody. There's no point, nobody will understand. And that sense of isolation is where overthinking becomes an absolute catastrophe. So to be able to communicate with people who have been through the same or similar I think is, without looking for a solution, it's just looking at how, how do we deal with it, and how has that varied through certain parts of our lives. I mean, sometimes I deal with it's not an issue at all, and other times it's a massive, great big issue.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Gareth, and thank you, listeners. As always, right, remember to check out the show notes. You can see a link to Gareth's book there. And yeah, we'll speak to you again very soon. Take care. Bye bye.
Okay. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Simon.